Hey everybody, it's Marty the JavaScript Party. I'm my buddy Rhett. I forgot to get a nut for her today. I'll probably try to grab one before the next video of the voice analysis. I swear it feels like a year ago the last time I did voice analysis. Um, so it's kind of, I think that's a good sign, right? I think it's a good sign when, like they say that as you get older, the time goes by faster. You're like, man, 2 years ago is like feels like yesterday or whatever. And I don't think that that is necessarily true. I think that if that is how it feels, you're probably doing something wrong. Um, if your days are very full of activities and new ideas and novel thoughts and just interacting with the world, I think like there's many times me and my wife feel like, man, this morning feels like that was 2 weeks ago. We say that all the time, and we're in our basically barely, but in our late 50s. And I don't feel like time is going by any faster now than it did when I was in my teens or anything like that. I feel like time seems to be going slower for me now because back then I just didn't have as much to do. Um, but yeah, so I think that maybe if you are feeling like time is flying by too fast, you should maybe reevaluate how you're sort of coming at life. But then and then here's what I one of the things I was sort of struggling with is that like AI, right? Like I think about AI all the time, and I can't figure out like if you've been around for more than like if you've been in technology for more than like 10 years, then you'll remember that like 5 years ago, like everybody was talking about non-fungible tokens, NFTs. Oh, NFTs, NFTs. That's all you ever heard about. How that was like there were movies about it. I mean, there was just like it was like all every TV show, everything. They were all talking about NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and like I don't know, never hear about them anymore. They're just like it was a fad. And then like in the early 90s, and I don't know 100% if this is true or not, but this is what I heard. And there were a lot of like little cartoons and little things like that in the late 90s about it. But like apparently it's been rumored or documented, I don't know, that Bill Gates said that the internet was a fad. Um, and it's like I feel like at this point we can say non-fungible tokens are a fad. I think we can also say that like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency are not a fad. But there was a time where it looked like they might just be a fad. Um, like, is AI a fad? Is it just like a fad that it's going to come and go? Or is it like a changing, like something that just changes everything? Um, in money in general, like is basically a giant IOU. So it kind of makes sense that like an IOU system that is outside of the control of the government but is reliable would blow up. I mean I'll fully admit, this is hindsight. Hindsight being 2020. It is also fully makes sense. Like if you were in 1993 and you were in the United States and you were like living in like where I was living, like in Orlando, and then you were visiting. Well, we used to visit Asheville, North Carolina. Not Asheville, but Burnsville, which is close to Asheville, North Carolina, all the time. Like 3 times a year, we'd go up there for personal reasons. And when you would do something, if someone did something like that, what you would do, it was just very common, is in the hotel you would get a hotel and then you would get a phone book, and then you would take the phone book home with you. And so then, and this was just like this was not stealing, right? Like nobody, like some people go to hotels and like steal the towels and steal the stuff like that, and that is in my, I believe that would be, that's like genuine stealing because that's something they would have reused. I think phone books were something that they just had piles and piles of, and the phone company was happy to deliver another phone book. They didn't have to pay for it or anything like that. Um, And then and it was like the phone book company, like they got paid by companies to go put their ads in the yellow pages, so they're perfectly happy for you to take that home because you were like an actual consumer. And then and then like if they put like shampoo, for example, in your hotel room and you use half of it, there obviously you should take that home. The right thing to do is to take that home because it's just going to go to waste. It's going to go to garbage if you don't take it home. Anyways, you would take the phone book home so that you could call and save a lot of money next time. Because if you just dropped into a town to get a hotel room, you might pay $200 or $100 for a night. And you go around to all the different hotels and you look tired and you say, hey, I would like a hotel, and they'd be like $100. And then you go to the next hotel and they would all be like with each other. But when you had a phone book, you could just call them all before you left. And you could just be like, hi. And most of them had like 1-800 numbers, so you didn't have to pay because you used to have to pay to call phone numbers. So it made total sense that the internet would become a, a thing because, to get on the internet was like $20 a month, and it would save you thousands and thousands of dollars every year, maybe tens of thousands of dollars, because you could, the information, because you had so much more access to so much more information. And then people who were creating things and all that had so much more access to so many more consumers, right? So like it makes sense that in hindsight being 2020, it makes sense that the internet would blow up. Is AI like the internet and like Bitcoin, or is AI like NFTs, where it's like we already have stuff to spend money on. Why do we need NFTs? Like, there's plenty of stuff to buy. So that's something that I think about a lot. And then the other thing that I've been sort of thinking about was like how, like when you write code, you're the I found that in my personal experience, the people who do the best as developers over time are either athletes, ex-athletes, or ex-musicians, people who, or current athletes and current musicians. And I think the only difference between them and like, let's say, somebody who just went to like engineering school, went to classes and all that, and then went to engineering school, is that just a fundamental feature of being an athlete or being a musician is practice. And for some reason, a lot of other people from other disciplines just don't even understand the concept of practice. And so athletes, like if you're, let's say you're a basketball player, you might spend an hour practicing your shooting, and then an hour practicing your dribbling, and then like another hour just trying to get as fast as you can sprinting. Like you find different ways so you can practice different aspects of your sport. And that's what really good programmers do. They find ways to practice coding. But I didn't really think about it, but there are like yesterday I kind of started to come to the conclusion that there are like three sort of variations of coding that if you want to develop a nice soft piece of software, there's like the top level coding where you're like worried about how the whole application works, and then there's the bug fix feature creation part, and then there's the like down and dirty, the lowest level atomic, making sure everything makes sense, that you don't have a bunch of code. And the reality is that probably literally 99% of all software is completely unmaintainable. I think that's just a fact. Most software is like, if you go in there and you try to take care of it, it's just not. It's very, very difficult to make heads or tails of what the heck you're looking at. And and I realized that I don't practice that. I do remember I spent a couple years, one point, trying to work on a project where I would only allow myself 5 minutes to work on it. And the thing is I got to where I could write code. Because the thing is it was always like I'd write code and the next day it would take me like an hour to come up to speed and figure out what the heck I wrote the day before. And so when I did this like 5 minute thing, I got to where it was like, oh, I could write code that tomorrow I'll be able to figure out again. I'll be able to come up to speed instantly. But and that worked pretty good. But the problem is like, I mean that's good. That's definitely a step forward, but it's not enough because, um, like, I would write code that I'll be able to come up to speed when I start working on the same code tomorrow. But the code didn't necessarily make sense that I wrote 2 months ago today, and so, and I realized, oh my gosh, that is what these unit tests are for. Is for so you to get your code set up to where when you come back to try to use it, you'll be able to use it. So there's that. So now yesterday when I was to get very very specific to what I'm working on, um, yesterday when I was looking at this code, I was like, man, it's annoying because I'm using this visualizations, which is a service attribute, and it makes it more difficult to unit test. It would be really nice if I didn't do that, but then I did a search on this visualizations. I wonder if that's still in my search. Yeah, delete visual this guy. Um, I did a search on that, and I found that it was being called outside of this thing. And so then I was like, but it's being called an UI service. Well, there's no reason why I can't just create a little function that literally just calls this function, that just gets the this visualizations and sends it to this function, and then this function does its thing. And that will make unit testing a lot easier. Um, but more importantly, it'll make it'll sort of divide sort of two different, um, it'll separate two different concerns. And one concern is interacting with the state, and the other concern is doing processes, um, deleting the visualization, right? Those are two different things, and I kind of have them mixed together here, and it'd be kind of nice to not have it that way. Now, the problem is now once I start stepping outside of things, who knows what I'll break, and who knows what might already be broken, because we've been sort of heads down in the weeds, not up there on things. And then I didn't really thoroughly test everything because my assumption was that it was kind of working. It seemed like everything was working, but I really needed to do some architectural moving of stuff around. And I couldn't really put my finger on exactly what needed to be done, but I needed to do that. And that piece would come while I did unit tests. And then when I did my end-to-end tests, I would be able to do a more thorough, deeper dive into making sure all the different pieces work. Um, and and then I might go through like a whole cycle again where I find something that's broken, go ahead and try to fix it all. While I'm trying to fix it all, I'll not be too worried about all these things making sense and all these different pieces. Then do another round of unit testing, get all the unit tests working and everything making sense, and then back to um, end-to-end testing. And it is kind of neat because with this 100% unit testing, what has happened is I've found a good way to find code that I have not put the microscope on yet. Now, so that's it. That's us deep in this code. Now, reality, like in real life, can you do this as a software developer? Probably not. You probably can't put this kind of time into these things, but you could probably get a lot faster at all these pieces, and maybe with enough practice you could get to where like everything you write is just clean. It all makes sense because you have practice doing that. And like the thing I'm really good at is adding features and fixing bugs. I'm good at that because that's what I have by far the most practice at. I'm also pretty good at testing at the high level. High level testing is something I'm very good at too, because, well, I have a ton of practice on that. But the weakest part of my coding is definitely this piece. So that's one thing. The other thing I do want to sort of bring up is one of the hopes, like there's dozens, I swear, I think every single day I say, one of the points of doing this whole thing is, and fill in the blank, and it's something different. There's three, if it's 20 days we're looking at, it's 20 different things. So obviously I can't really narrow down. But one of the things I really was hoping to get out of this and is to create enterprise level problems in a non-enterprise application so that I could focus on the best ways. I'll get you a nut for the next meeting, the next movie, okay? Um, um, so that I could focus on like understanding these sort of issues that come up all the time. And you end up fixing them, you end up getting it to work. And even now with like um, ChatGPT and all that, it's going to be even more so where you build stuff that you don't know exactly how it works. And and it may use some sort of advanced concept that you don't understand at all. And and then you have a mess. I think I've probably told this story before, but like I used to have a good friend, and he was a part of a family that was very technical, like in the 1950s, and they had built a system that was attached to a mainframe, and it was a bunch of like machines and stuff attached to a mainframe, and it sounded pretty amazing. I never saw it, but basically, what you would do is you would dump cotton on one side and then push a button and it does all kinds of stuff, and literally on the other side comes out sheets. So like 1950 style sheets, and then their main customers were like bed and breakfasts and hotels that try to be authentic 1950 style bed and breakfast and stuff like that. And so this is a company that I believe it was churning off 250 to $300,000 a year in profit, and it was employing like, and it may still be, I don't know, like anywhere from 10 to 15 people were employed doing this, all the different various things that need to be done to make the sheets, right? But the thing is in their mainframe that they had, they couldn't write any new code, and they couldn't even do any real maintenance or anything, because they had already put it would only accept a wrong password 3 times, and no one knew what the password was, and they'd already gotten it wrong twice. So if they ever put the wrong password again, it would just lock down. So basically, we have a machine here that like a bunch of people are employed with, and the people that the family they make like $600 a week, $500 or $600 a week off of this. And one of the other major issues was that when it was just the grandparents that owned this thing, they were making like $200,000-$300,000 a year, and it was worth putting massive investment into this thing to keep it going. But now that they had like a bunch of descendants, there was 10 of them, they were dividing all this money up amongst 10 people, and it wasn't really worth it to any of them individually to put a bunch of investment into this business. So anyways, one day, and probably it's already happened, the machine's going to break. Then all those people are out of a job, and no more sheets. This is going to be a very silent failure. It's not going to make any news. No one's going to know anything about it. I think that kind of thing is happening literally every single day in the United States. Like machines and systems are collapsing and not working anymore, and that's probably and then it just doesn't happen anymore. Like whatever systems were being supported by that, and individuals and people just don't get their money anymore, and then the entire economy just shrinks a tiny bit quietly. I think we are having that issue. I think that is the main issue, is that all the 1940s and 50s technologies that we really still use a lot are just slowly but surely just winnowing away and going away. And some of them, when they go away, just pop. They're just gone. There's no Like I do know of a payroll company that they have a mainframe that figures out all the like overtime and all the very very complex rules of union work dock workers in New Jersey, I think. And it's like those people are um like when that thing quits working, and it will, when it quits working, um those people are gonna they'll, they won't just shut down, right? They'll just like change up how they do stuff. They're not gonna quit shipping stuff in and paying people. Um, they're just gonna figure that out, But like then there are things like the sheet company where they're just gonna be gone. Um, but anyways, let's just check to see how this works because I kind of want to check to see how it works before I redo this so I can kind of check again after and just make sure it still works the way it is. I don't know if it really really works or not, but so we're just gonna add like 3 things, and then we're gonna close this, and then we're gonna go to tabular view, and I'm just gonna delete the middle one, and then I'm going to come back. Okay, so I just want that to work. Let's see what happens if I hit reflow. So now, reflow. Oh, so we had reflow on, so it should have already. See, things are kind of broken already, um, and because let's see, add. So put it in there. Yeah, I don't know. So we just want it to be basically functional at the end of this change. Um, and then we're gonna worry about there's a time and place. I've created a time and place to worry about like those things working correctly. I don't even know exactly how I want them to work at this point. So there's gonna be a time and place for that, and that time and place is gonna be when um, when we're doing our end-to-end tests. Um, but for now, I want to refactor this so that I have another function, and I don't know what this was called. There's probably a very slick name, but I want to refactor this so that I have another function that gets this information and passes it in. And you know what? This is what ChatGPT is great at. Okay, so let's go to ChatGPT and just ask it about this. And it's funny because I see all the time people going like, oh, ChatGPT, no one even knows how it works and all that. It's like that literally describes 90% of code. No one knows how it works. The vast majority of, and the thing I was thinking about a lot yesterday were like ants and how like the ants can make these bridges that go across rivers, and they can make these balls, and they can do all these weird things, and no individual ant I don't think knows what they're trying to do, but for some reason they can individually do their little piece. And then I remember when I worked for a payroll company, they would, like, I worked for the enterprise, for the national accounts, and national accounts was any organization that had more than 10,000 payrolls. And no one knew when we would move from one payroll company to our payroll company before I got there. Nobody knew how that happened. It would be like, oh, I don't know, XYZ person talks to XY person, and Z person talks to this person, and and somehow, and no one knew what all the steps were to getting payrolls moved over to the other thing. And then when we built our software, that was actually one of the side effects that no one had really expected, is after the software was built, you could actually tell where everything went. But anyways, so I have this TS Angular code. Now, it kind of will tell me stuff that I don't care about. It looks like you filled out visual without passing. So, what? But there isn't a, but there's a bug in the callback filter you're calling. The actual ST visualization item. But this is the actual ST visualization item. So anyways, I don't know what it's talking about there, and I'm not gonna dig into it because I have a specific thing I want to learn. Um, so, so the issue I'm trying to fix, or trying to deal with, is that I think it, man, it really tilted me on that. Is that rather pass in the list of visualizations so that this function will be easier to test. Function pure, so I'm glad for the confirmation. Easier unit test refactored. Okay, so what is that called? So yeah, thinking about creating a new function that and all it would do is accept the st renderer ID and then call this function with the list as a second parameter. Yes, that's a great pattern, especially. Okay, so does that pattern have a name? It has a few names. The facade pattern. It's kind of weird. That's a weird name. I wonder why it's pronounced that way. Um, what it means is you're creating a simplified public-facing function. Delete visualization. I'm about to sneeze, and I know it makes a crazy sound when I do this, but I'm gonna pop this thing when I do sneeze. The wrapper, thin wrapper function. I've never heard that one. I've heard the facade before, um, and I have no. Again, I don't know why it's pronounced the way it is. Is a function that does a little more than call a function with what it fits. So thin wrapper function is another, and then dependency injection. I don't know. I don't think that is an example of dependency injection, but maybe it is. Pure function extraction. Oh, I like that. I feel like that is the best one. I've never heard that either. Tried to extract that to isolate side effects and make unit testing easier. Okay, so I guess I don't need to sneeze. Anyways, okay, so we're gonna do this pure function extraction. Um, do you know why facade is pronounced such a weird way? Yeah, it's pronounced facade, pronounced facade. Sod means because it comes from French. It's the French. The French. I saw some guy talking about how interesting things about the French language and how like the French language is absolutely beautiful. When I hear people speak it, it's absolutely beautiful. But when they're saying people speak English, for some reason, they just come off as insanely rude. It's strange. It's just so strange how rude they is. And it was saying that like this person, I don't know if he was telling the truth or not, but he was saying that in French they don't really have the concept of like different words for different um like we I think they just have bonjour, bonjour, and it's just like hello. They don't have like good afternoon. Like they don't have. Okay, that was wrong. The way what I just said. What they don't have is like different words for different respect levels. So like sup bro is something we might say. Like my son may go up to one of his friends and say sup bro, but it's very unlikely that he would come up to me and say sup bro. He would say oh hello. And if he was really trying to be nice, he'd be like hello father, good afternoon father, something like that, you know, like. And I don't apparently, and I don't know if this is true, I really don't. Well, apparently they don't really have that sort of thing going in that language. So like they just don't do that, you know. So they end up sounding very rude. But anyways, it looks like we're doing like a facade pattern or a. I kind of like this one, pure function extraction pattern. Um, so um, so let's see. I'm just going to call this remove visualization for renderer ID. So instead of delete, I don't know. Wonder if it has. What would you name? Name the function that calls. And I will say that I don't really understand how this works. Like how in the world it can take a question um, like this and come up with an answer. But like that is so not novel, right? That is not novel. I can't tell you. Like I can't freaking for the life of me understand how in the world the debuggers do what they do, especially like the TypeScript, the ones that are doing in TypeScript, and you're like how does it do that? And or the ones that take debug through like executable, like code that's going to be compiled into executable DLLs and things like that. I mean, there's so many things that I don't understand. So like, there's nothing particularly novel that I don't understand this. Um, and many times when you do that, oh my gosh, that is crazy. Uh, how, ooh, see, basically it's just using a synonym. Prune visualization by render ID is probably the best one. Apply renderer ID filter. Filter out order, update visualization, exclude. So I think prune is good. I think prune does a really good, is a really good. Pruning is what we do. If you, I don't know how familiar you are with these words, but this is like what you do to like plants to remove things that little pieces of it that you don't want. You still want the plant to survive. You just want to prune off pieces. So I feel like prune is a really good. And this is going to take an ST renderer ID. And then it's going to return a Boolean. And then it's going to I feel like something's wrong up here. Then it's going to, I'm going to say removed, let removed, and I'm going to assume that it moved is equal to false. And then I'm going to and I guess I think I might change this one to a Boolean as well. So I'm going to say this dot delete render ID. It'll be interesting, like when we're doing end to end, if we find out that this function just isn't even working right. that won't surprise me, and we'll be like, oh, I remember. Hopefully, I'll be like, oh, I remember when ChatGPT said this function doesn't work right. But I think unit testing, figure out if the we should figure out if it's actually removing the uh, renderer ID that we want. Which then now I'm violating. I'm violating one of my original rules, which was we aren't unit testing to actually make sure code works. We were unit testing just to achieve 100%. But I feel like now I actually want to make sure that this code actually works. So I guess that, and I guess we can just say const removed equals. And I guess we can just say this, return this. Because we're going to change that to a number, to a Boolean. And we want to pass a second thing called this.visualizations. And then we got to do a bit of refactoring here. Visualizations, and that is an array of visualizations. And that should be a little s. ST visualizations. Okay, yeah, so this does not do what I want it to do. Okay, what I want to do is return a list of visualizations. I want to return the new visualizations. So basically, I guess I want to determine this. So const initial viz length is equal to this dot visualizations dot length, and then const new visualizations. So good morning, rat. Ooh, yeah. And it's equal to this dot visualizations. Usually she gets really quiet when I get into this sort of zone coding. Now we're going to say let updated equals false. And then we're going to say if, and I don't know if this is the best way to do this. So basically, if this length is different than this visualization's length, then we know is less than this dot visualizations, right? I think it makes sense. Then we know that it removed at least one. Should have only been one, but you know, it removed it. Sure, updated. That was pretty good. Brett did pretty good on that one, like coming up with the right words that went with what I was saying. Sure. See, like she does, like I don't know what her level of intelligence is, but she does a lot like a LLM. Yeah, she listens to our words and then like she heard me saying something and she heard, I don't know why, based on maybe the inflections or anything, she goes, sure, sure. Um, that's exactly like what my wife would have said, for example. And when I'm saying something, when I'm like, okay, so yeah, in the morning we're gonna have to take care of these because of X, Y, Z, and she'll go, sure, because like she's like, yeah, I think that's obvious, um, or that totally makes sense. So return updated. And that's not quite enough because we also need to update. Updated. We need to update our this.visualizations is equal to new visualizations. All right, so basically, okay, so we don't need this initial length, actually. So we're going to say, hey, give me a list of all the visualizations without and remove the rendered ID. And basically, I probably should say let updated equals false before that. Probably makes more sense. So we're going to say, hey, by default, our update is false. Now go ahead and give me a list of all that. Okay, do they have the same length? We're going to assume that the length is all you need to know to see that it was deleted, that it was pruned. And if it's less, then we're going to say, yeah, we did in fact update it and all that. And I guess just for the sake of, then we're going to update it and we're going to mark the updated flag up to true and we're going to return updated. Now, over here, our const visualizations, that's the visualizations, a new visualizations directory, and we're going to return our visualizations, and we are not going to assign it here. So we don't even interact with that at all. Now, and then we have this. All right. So I'm just curious if I take these three functions, if I still have if it still says I have a bug in there. There's no reason to bury my head in the sand here. So, okay, so here is what I have now. So you're not actually using the ST visualization in the filter function. And it does kind of give me that, like, because it's gray. Filter function. Oh. Okay, so delete visualization. Okay, so it's saying that I'm literally just creating a function and never calling it. And I think what is happening here is it appears that I have a fundamental misunderstanding of how filter function works. It's not applying it to the filter. So now it's offering a fix. And I think that does make sense. The filter. So basically, this looks just like my code. And then it's saying create your filter function like this. Or more concisely, this delete render. Oh, Lord. Okay. It is interesting, though, because over here, it's just like, you don't use this visualization. So could I create, I wonder if I can create this function outside of. All right, so So I think this doesn't even need the visualization, right? So I think I can do this. I am truly learning here. Delete filter fn equals. Okay, so now I've created a function that deletes and then I'm giving it the function here to use. And this is like one of these things where like it all, I think this works. I think this is right. It's different than what they said. I'm declaring the function and then saying, hey, I am creating one function that knows how to accept a renderer and yeah, I think so. I'm definitely gonna have to think on this for a little bit, but I feel like yeah, and and I was mentioning yesterday that like a lot of people say JavaScript is sort of like like you can do so much and have a complete gap in your understanding. I think I had a huge gap in my understanding of the way the filter function works. But to me, this makes a lot more sense, actually. How about... And it is crazy that it was able to... So my thinking is that I'm now doing everything right. My thinking is that people must make this mistake, must have this misunderstanding all the time. And so it's just probably seeing examples where people just got this wrong. Now, how it's able to sort of pull out the important parts, but I do think this works better. Optional minor polish. Let's see. What does it want me to do? Already clean. I think okay, so I don't, yeah. So yeah. So yeah. Main goal was to make delete visualization for renderer ID pure unit testing purposes. So that thing was not working. We know that. See if it had suggested. Oh, so now it just suggests unit test of example. So I feel pretty good about that. All right, so let's see. Oh no. Oh, okay, that makes sense. So this broke because there's a couple places that I'm using it, but UI service is the main one. And it's saying it want that, but we want to use the prune, our new prune function. So I think if you're watching this and you're just trying to learn stuff and all that, I've kind of done half the job. And that half the job is I've discovered a very complicated, confusing thing in the wild. I've created my own wild. I've created a very complex, confusing thing that is very difficult to understand. Now, really the next natural step would be to spend a bunch of time creating sort of a convoluted example that sort of describes how everything works, and then you could bounce back and forth between like the wild version and the sanitized version and try to understand it better. But honestly, like I totally respect the people that do the other part. It just is such a time consuming thing, you know, to edit and go over it and then not end up creating something that's even more confusing than to begin with. But so right now everything is working. I probably have a straight up broken unit test now, but let's just see what we get when we add and delete now. So we reflow is on, so that means we don't hold anything. Delete. Add. So it's kind of doing what it was doing before. I feel like it's not right, whatever it's doing. I don't know exactly what right is. So now if I add one, it'll add it to the beginning, which I think is fine. And what if I add another one? Then it adds it to the end. I feel like that's really fine. I do think that something's weird that this one is moving so fast. I don't know though. Maybe it's not. I don't know. It's hard to tell how fast it's moving. But we'll turn off free flow. Remove the first two. Turn this back on. Oh, okay. So one of the things we wanted when we have reflow on is that it would redraw when. So I think it's working. I don't know. We'll definitely do a deeper dive. And I don't even know like if I've fully defined it, but I'm guessing my unit tests are broken now. But I'm also thinking that this is going to be a lot easier to unit test. And I'm also thinking that we got a bunch of issues in this file that are very similar to this that we're going to have to deal with. But let's go ahead and run the test. Run test. Run the test. 1, 2, 3. Run the test. So I definitely feel like I've learned a lot. I do like this a lot better now. I like this, especially this part right here, a lot better. I think that is so much easier to test. And I think that this is going to be super simple to test. I think this one's going to be super simple to test now. And I think this one's going to be super simple to test. This one will require a bit of interaction, updating of the service's state. But this one doesn't require any state interaction. This one doesn't. And like really all we're going to ask it for is to that it runs this and that it does this check. And I guess we'll also want to make sure that that length is less. So, you know, that shouldn't be too bad. I think that, yeah, the unit tests are still building. I think that's cool, though. I definitely feel good about this. And, you know, I honestly do think that, like, all three of these on their own are fairly easy to understand now. I don't think there's anything, like, mysterious. Whereas before, I actually didn't even understand what it was doing. And now I feel like I totally understand what it was doing. So like you can write code that you don't understand that works. I remember there used to be this language. It's probably still around. I actually once in a while I'll see there's jobs for it. So all the unit tests are passing. Um, I would see jobs. I do see jobs for it every once in a while, where people are like for Perl, and everyone I've ever known that codes in Perl, and I've never coded in the latest Perl, so it might not be that way, but would always say like it was just incredible. Like you could literally write incredibly powerful code, like code that could just do all this amazing stuff, step away for like 5 minutes and come back and you couldn't understand what you wrote. Like it was just so hard to understand. But here we go. See where we're at on this last one. Go in there. It's so funny. Yesterday when I was starting the show, I was like, I hope to have unit tests done today. Yep. So that is wild. So these two are all taken care of by other unit tests. It's kind of cool because really I think this is the only one we have to unit test, and we'll still even right now these are probably being unit tested through something else through as a side effect of something else. But once we get this one, it'll get both of those anyways. And basically, this should be pretty easy to um, unit test. I don't even think, yeah, it should be fine, even if new visualize, even if we, without that, right? This one should be super simple to test now. And I think it's super clear. And I do not think it was super clear yesterday. So that's a win. Anyways, we win. We're winners. Winners. Anyways, happy coding, everybody. We'll finish up this unit test tomorrow and get into our next mess. Probably on Sunday. Maybe well, actually, it should only take a couple minutes to do this, and then we'll probably on Sunday we'll get rolling. We'll get started on this tomorrow, and then get hopefully have it done on Sunday. And then this one is different. This one probably needs a different difficult concept, which is where it creates a function that that calls itself every time it calls. I think we're going to need that. I can't remember what kind of function that's called, but basically we're going to need that. I think instead of a for each loop, we'll probably have to be like, I don't know. We'll have to see. I think that again, this is code that isn't quite clear. We got it to work, but it isn't quite clear. And I think that once we go through the same exact process again, it will be very clear. That's my hope, and that is pretty cool. And then maybe if I practice making these very, very clear in the future, I'll have that skill of being able to write code that does these sort of advanced things that's super clear. And then it's kind of weird because like when you get those skills, as an individual, it's easy for you to take it for granted because it becomes what a lot of times in code, I would say the majority of time in code when you're doing something, it's either very, very easy or damn near impossible. And once it goes into that easy phase or easy mode, then you kind of forget why it was impossible or that it was ever impossible. Which is one reason why it's really hard for new people to get into coding, because most people who know how to code don't realize how hard it was to learn how to do what they do. But anyways, happy coding, everybody. Bye.